There are 11 things Japanese households almost never spend money on, and together they explain why the average Japanese family walks away with roughly 3 times the savings of an American family pulling in the same income. It isn't about willpower or being naturally better with money. It's that a whole set of habits that quietly drain an American bank account every month simply never took root in the first place. We'll go through all 11 today, and there's a good chance you'll spot at least 4 of them sitting somewhere in your own life before we're even halfway through. The first thing shows up on a bank statement, not on a shelf, which is exactly why it's the easiest one to miss. The first thing is a handful of recurring charges that nobody in the house has actually used in months. A streaming app nobody's opened since spring. A subscription box from a free trial that started back in 2023 and quietly turned into a paid one. A fitness app downloaded for a single trip and forgotten the moment the suitcase got unpacked. Households commonly bleed something close to $270 a month this way, which lands well over $3,000 a year without a single new choice ever getting made. A subscription isn't really an ongoing purchase. It's a decision from years ago that never got revisited. Japanese consumers tend to treat anything that renews automatically with real suspicion, a habit sometimes described as mikagiri, staying sharply aware of any cost that repeats unless you've actively chosen it again. Nothing on this month's statement was decided this month. It was decided once, a long time ago, and every charge since has just been interest on that. Streaming platforms in particular have gotten good at making cancellation, just annoying enough that most people give up halfway through the process and simply keep paying instead. Cancel a card entirely, and most services will email you a retention offer within the hour, dangling half price for 3 months just to keep the subscription technically alive, which tells you exactly how much margin was built into that original price in the first place. The second thing hangs in a closet that's somehow always full, while you're standing in front of it convinced you own nothing to wear. The second thing is a wardrobe built out of cheap, fast fashion, $5 or $15 at a time. An online haul that shows up with a dozen items, most of which get worn once for a picture and then never again. A new top bought during a rough week because it felt like an easy way to feel better. A copycat purchase because someone at the office had something similar on. None of it feels reckless in the moment, and yet the rack keeps getting heavier while nothing old ever seems to wear out. A Japanese wardrobe tends to grow slowly across years around a quiet sense of personal style known as iki, confidence in your own taste, rather than in whatever's currently trending. The whole closet often sits around 20 pieces, each one picked with real care and worn for a decade or more, so getting dressed takes under 2 minutes because the hard decisions were already made long before that morning. That feeling of having nothing to wear was never really about quantity. It's the exhaustion of choosing between 40 pieces you're lukewarm on instead of 8 you genuinely love. There's also something quietly freeing about never having to wonder what to wear to a given event, because every piece in that small closet already gets along with every other piece in it. There's also a repair culture that fills the gap fast fashion never leaves room for. Small tailors and shoe repair shops that can restitch a hem or resole a boot for a fraction of what a replacement would cost. So a well-made piece just keeps getting extended instead of retired. The third thing gets hauled in by the case, and it's probably stacked by your back door right now, whether you've thought about it in years or not. The third thing is bottled water bought in bulk from a warehouse club. 24 to a case, several cases cycling through the fridge at once, restocked every couple of weeks on autopilot. Usually it comes down to not liking the taste of tap water, not trusting it, or just growing up in a house that always did the same thing. Stretch that habit across a decade and a typical household has carried something like 10,000 plastic bottles through the front door, the vast majority of them empty within minutes, and then sitting in a landfill for centuries afterward. The annual cost usually falls somewhere between $250 and $600, which turns into roughly $4,000 over 10 years. What's actually being paid for isn't the water at all. It's in the bottling and hauling of it, since the pipes already running into the house deliver drinkable tap water for pennies on the gallon in comparison. A typical Japanese kitchen solves this with a cheap filter screwed straight onto the faucet and a glass bottle kept cold in the fridge. An approach tied to a broader idea called shizen, leaning on what's already available instead of working around it for no reason. Most municipal tap water in the U.S. already meets stricter safety standards than what's printed on the bottled label sitting next to it in the fridge, which makes the whole habit even harder to justify once you actually look into it. The fourth thing is probably what most people would guess first if you ask them to name a source of pointless spending, and it's sitting in a drawer next to the stove right now. The fourth thing is a graveyard of single-use kitchen tools. An avocado slicer bought during a 2-week phase that never lasted. A strawberry huller still sealed in its box. A garlic press nobody touches because scrubbing it out takes longer than just mincing the clove by hand. Each one ran somewhere between $6 and $12 and felt like a smart little upgrade at checkout. A typical Japanese kitchen operates on roughly 3 tools total, 1 sharp knife, a wooden board, and a single pan. An approach rooted in the idea called shokunin, the craftsman's habit of getting genuinely skilled with a small handful of tools rather than owning a narrow gadget built for one single job apiece. Every gadget in that drawer was marketed as a shortcut, and every one of them actually cost time because now there's something extra to dig out, rinse, dry, and put away for a job the knife could have finished in 10 seconds. Ironically, the drawer full of single-purpose tools usually gets replaced by a brand new drawer full of single-purpose tools every couple of years, since the old ones get donated in a burst of guilt, and the whole cycle quietly starts over from a different catalog. The fifth thing rarely gets counted as a kitchen expense, mostly because it usually shows up somewhere between the garage and the fitness aisle instead. The fifth thing is home exercise equipment bought right after a New Year's resolution, and quietly abandoned by February. A treadmill that's become the most expensive clothes rack in the house, an elliptical folded up under a moving blanket in the corner of the garage, a set of resistance bands still zip-tied inside their original packaging 2 years later. Home cardio machines commonly run anywhere from $300 to $1,500, and most surveys on home gym habits find the majority of that gear goes unused within roughly 6 months of the purchase. Resale sites are full of barely used treadmills listed at half price for exactly this reason, which tells you almost everything about how the story usually ends before it even begins. Gym memberships tend to follow a nearly identical pattern in reverse, paid monthly and attended heavily for exactly 3 weeks, before quietly becoming background noise on a bank statement, which is really just the same fifth habit wearing a slightly different outfit. Japan never really developed a culture built around owning a dedicated machine for every workout. Public sports centers are affordable and everywhere. Walking counts as transportation rather than a fitness routine on its own. And a decades-old habit called Ragyo Taiso, a few minutes of free group calisthenics broadcast every single morning, quietly replaces what an American household might spend thousands trying to recreate at home. It's the same shokunin idea from the kitchen drawer showing up again in the garage. You don't need to buy a dedicated tool for a task you can already handle with what you've got. The sixth thing is the reason your garage or closet always seems to need just one more organizing system no matter how many you've already bought. The sixth thing is a growing collection of storage bins that were supposed to solve the clutter and ended up just giving it a new address. A stack of empty bins waiting for something to hold, sitting beside a second stack whose contents nobody can identify anymore. A closet system installed last spring that's already crying out for a second closet system to manage it. Households commonly spend somewhere close to $1,200 a year on storage and organizing products, then report feeling exactly as cluttered 12 months later, sometimes worse. A Japanese home runs on a concept called katazuke, returning every object to a place it actually belongs. And the piece most people overlook is that an item with no genuine specific spot in the house isn't meant to stay in the house at all. A bin lets you dodge that decision completely, since dropping something inside turns a genuinely hard call about whether to keep it into an easy, guilt-free errand instead. The bin was never fixing a storage problem. It was quietly giving permission to keep owning more than the house could actually hold. And once a bin fills up, the instinct is rarely to sort through what's inside it, it's to buy a slightly bigger bin for next time, which is how a single closet can quietly swallow an entire weekend's worth of Saturday errands. The seventh thing sits on a bathroom shelf that hasn't fully closed in years, and it costs a lot more than it looks like from the outside. The seventh thing is an overloaded skincare shelf. A toner, an essence, a hyaluronic serum, a vitamin C serum, a nighttime retinol, an eye cream, 2 different moisturizers, 3 cleansers rotated by mood, a jade roller used exactly twice back in 2020, and a forgotten sheet mask buried at the very back that expired 2 years ago. Skincare spending regularly climbs past $3,000 a year per person, and dermatologists have pointed out that once a routine passes roughly 5 active ingredients, they often work against each other rather than together, with one acid quietly neutralizing whatever active ingredient gets layered on top of it. Dermatologists will often tell you that trying 5 new products at once also makes it nearly impossible to know which one actually caused the breakout that shows up 2 weeks later, so the guessing just continues. A Japanese approach tends to center on a word, kirei, meaning clean and cared for in one breath, usually a gentle cleanser, one hydrating step, and a nightly moisturizer used consistently for years on end. The payoff comes from that consistency, not from how many bottles are involved. That shelf was never really a routine. It's a small collection of hopes riding on whatever bottle gets added next, each one promising the result the 5 before it never actually gave. The 8th thing shows up inside an app instead of a shopping bag, which is exactly why it's so easy to lose track of what it actually costs over a year. The 8th thing is takeout and delivery ordered purely out of convenience rather than any real need. a late weeknight order placed because cooking felt like too much after a long day, a delivery charge, a service fee, and a tip all stacked on top of a meal that would have cost a third as much made at home. Any single order feels harmless enough, but the households that lean on delivery apps regularly can end up handing over several hundred extra dollars a month once every small fee gets tallied up. And it rarely feels that large because it's spread across a dozen tiny charges instead of one obvious one. Some delivery booking apps have also started burying a rotating markup directly into the menu prices themselves, so that the same burger costs more through the app than it does walking in and ordering at the counter, on top of every fee already stacked at checkout. Japanese households tend to treat cooking at home, jisui, as the default rather than the exception, backed up by convenience stores that sell genuinely solid, cheap-prepared meals for the handful of nights nobody wants to touch a stove at all. Delivery isn't banned or looked down on there, it's just never the automatic answer to being a little tired on a Tuesday. The math rarely gets done in the moment because a single delivery fee looks small enough to ignore, right up until you add together every order from the last 12 months in one sitting. The ninth thing gets bought in bulk because it feels like the responsible move, and right now it's sitting in your pantry doing the opposite of saving you anything. The ninth thing is warehouse-sized snacks purchased because the price per ounce looks better on the label. A family box of crackers, a case of granola bars, a party bag of chips that was meant to stretch across a month and vanished in 4 days flat instead. Research on bulk buying households has found they end up eating close to 44% more of a given snack in a typical week compared with people buying that exact same product in smaller portions, largely because an oversized bag is hard to reseal and even harder to tuck out of sight. So it just sits out on the counter reminding your brain it's there every time you pass it. There's a psychological trick buried in the packaging too, since a bag that size is priced to feel like the smarter, more grown-up decision, even though the only thing it's actually optimizing for is how much of it disappears before the expiration date ever becomes relevant. Households in Japan tend to shop in small amounts, more often buying only what covers the next 2 or 3 days, guided by shun, eating what's currently fresh and in season instead of stockpiling for some hypothetical future. That bigger bag was never a real bargain. It quietly trained you to eat roughly double what you normally would, and let the receipt take credit for a deal that was never really there. The 10th thing barely registers as spending on any single trip, which is exactly why nobody ever catches themselves doing it. The 10th thing is decorative household objects bought purely to make a room feel done. A candle sitting in a nice jar, a throw pillow in this season's approved color, a small ceramic piece for the console table, a wooden sign with some inspirational word painted across it in cursive. The space genuinely looks better for a few days, then your eye stops noticing any of it and the whole thing reads as unfinished again. So a couple of weekends later, you're picking up another candle and something small to set it on. Tally it up across 5 years, and most households have spent enough on this alone to cover a real vacation. Home decor brands understand this cycle better than almost anyone, which is why entire product lines get refreshed by season instead of by actual wear, quietly nudging a perfectly fine pillow into looking dated a year after it was bought. A Japanese home usually keeps very few objects around that exist purely to be looked at, shaped by an idea called in yono-bai, beauty rooted in usefulness, where a tea bowl earns its keep because it holds tea well. A folded cloth is admired for folding cleanly, and a cast iron kettle still gets called beautiful because it's been boiling water for 2 centuries and it keeps doing exactly that. Once an object stops doing a job, whatever beauty it had tends to curdle into pure performance instead, and every purely ornamental piece in the house is quietly functioning like a small subscription payment on the feeling of being finally done decorating, a feeling that never lasts long enough to actually pay itself off. And the 11th thing happens in about 30 seconds at checkout, which is exactly why it's so easy to say yes without really thinking about it. The 11th thing is the extended warranty pitched right after you've already committed to a bigger purchase. You're buying a laptop or a TV, and just before the payment goes through, the clerk asks if you want to add coverage for another $80 or $90. Compared with what you're already spending, it barely registers, so you agree and forget about it within days. Households commonly spend somewhere between $200 and $400 annually on extended coverage plans, spread across different purchases, and the overwhelming majority of those plans, north of 90%, are never actually used, with most of the ones that do get used covering something the manufacturer already handled at no charge. Extended warranties rank among the highest margin products sold anywhere in retail, which explains exactly why they're pushed, at the one moment your decision fatigue happens to peak. Employee training at a lot of retailers is built specifically around this pitch, right down to the exact phrasing and the exact pause right after the total appears on the register screen, because the numbers show most people say yes in that window. And almost nobody says yes if you ask them the same question a day later. Japanese consumer habits push back hard against add-ons like this, shaped by an idea called mottainai, a deep discomfort with Fuji's wasting anything, including money spent guarding against a fear that was never worth paying for in the first place. Nobody actually bought protection there. They bought the feeling of being protected, a feeling the product already carried for free the moment it left the box. Loyalty apps and store credit cards quietly work the same angle from a different direction, dangling a small discount today in exchange for a permanent line item that outlives the reason you ever signed up for it. All 11 of these work the exact same way underneath. Any one of these on its own barely moves the needle, which is exactly why they survive year after year without ever getting questioned. One decision, made a single time, keeps quietly costing you every month, every year, without ever asking you to decide anything again. They're not 11 unrelated problems scattered across different corners of your life. They're one pattern repeating itself 11 separate times, and that pattern is a single old choice still quietly draining your account long after your attention moved on to something else entirely. It's worth pointing out that none of these 11 habits require earning more money to fix. Every single one is a spending pattern you can simply stop choosing tomorrow morning, which is a very different kind of problem than the ones most personal finance advice tries to solve. Print out that same statement once a year instead of once, and you'll usually catch 2 or 3 of these before they've had time to become permanent fixtures. If a few of these hit closer to home than you expected, tell me in the comments which one you're cutting first. And if you found this useful, hit subscribe to catch the next breakdown on money habits that quietly add up over time. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.